What's going on, guys? Welcome to Unforgettable Personal Branding for Entrepreneurs. My name is Saba Lee. If you guys are new, I know a lot of you guys are quite new to this group. I know we've gotten like dozens and dozens of members throughout this past week or so. So if you guys are new, drop a comment below if you're tuning in right now. Comment below hashtag Team Live. And if you guys are watching in the replay, comment below hashtag Team Replay. So this week has been a little crazy for me catching up after my travels, but I know a lot of people wanted to join on in this live, and I promised that I would tag you guys. So give me a sec to tag a few of you people who want to join on here live with us. So I have a super special guest on today. So Dan is actually, so I met Dan through Facebook, and he was actually my coach who helped me structure my TEDx talk. So I just gave that last week. It's actually been an exact week since I've given my first talk, which is super exciting. So I wanted to bring him on here and talk about kind of the entire structure of giving a TEDx talk, you know, how to get one, what it's about, and how to really structure it to give a really successful talk. So if you guys are tuning in, drop a comment below. Let me know where you guys are tuning in from. Give me a few seconds to just tag a few people on here so they can join us live. So in the meantime, Dan, I'm going to have you just kind of take over right now and introduce yourself, say a few things, and people are going to start hopping on here.
Okay, thanks. I'm glad to be here. My name is Dan Meyer. I'm in Mesa, Arizona right now, where it's nice and warm. And for everybody who's jumping on here, first of all, I would like to know how many of you have ever done a TED Talk before, TEDx Talk? How many of you would like to do a TED Talk or TEDx Talk? How many of you are already working on a TEDx Talk? And how many of you have already submitted yourself for TEDx Talks or have got an invitation to do one? If you could put a comment below that says that you're working on one or that you'd like to do one, but you haven't been invited yet. And actually put in some of your questions below. Are your questions how to get invited to do a TED Talk, how to do a TED Talk, how to put it together, how to construct it, that kind of thing. And we'll go through all of this. We've got a little bit of an idea for a structure here today. But before we go much further, I want you to each imagine yourself. You're getting ready to do your first TEDx talk, and you're backstage. It's dark. The announcer is doing your introduction. They're putting the mic on you. Your nerves are, you're shaken. You're just very nervous. And then they introduce you, and you walk out there on that stage, and you stand on that red dot, and you take a deep breath, look around the audience, you open your mouth, and you start giving your very first TED Talk, TEDx Talk. And 15 minutes, 18 minutes, 12 minutes later, whatever your time restraint is, you're finished. The audience jumps to their feet. They give you a standing ovation, and you've just given your first TEDx Talk. Now, if you can imagine that being you, put a comment below that says, you know, that's what I want to do. And if that's you, I can tell you how to do that and how to get to that point. Saba and I worked over it for, 2 months, I guess we worked on it?
Yeah. So I didn't even know that it takes an entire process to structure a TEDx talk because I've given a lot of like speeches. I've spoken at different conferences, but when I got connected with you and I actually made a Facebook post, I was like, who's done a TEDx talk who can kind of help me with the structure? The first call I got on you with you, Dan, I was like, what? There's an entire structure to putting this together. And my mind was completely blown.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Well, a lot of people ask me, how did you get invited to do a TED Talk? Now, just for a little background, I have done 9 of them on 4 continents so far. The very first one was the largest TEDx Talk in Europe in Maastricht, Netherlands. And it was on September 4th, 2013. And then I did one in Armenia. I did the largest one in North Africa. I've done several here in the United States, in Tampa, in Huntsville. And there is a process. There are some secrets that I can teach you on how to do it. But people say, how did you get to that first one? And
Mhm.
there's kind of a counterintuitive way of going about getting your first TEDx talk. It doesn't make much sense. So in 2008, I'm going to tell you just a little quick backstory because stories are very crucial to TED Talks. In 2008, 2006, I had seen a TEDx talk by a guy by the name of Hans Rosling. And Hans was a Swedish scientist in Stockholm, and he's done several big TED Talks. Well, his TEDx talk, first one in 2006, was #2 out of, it had millions and millions and millions of views, and was huge. And at the end of his TED Talk, he swallows a small Swedish bayonet. Well, I'm the president of the Sword Swallowers Association International, and I do sword swallowing all around the world. So that's kind of my thing. And so I said, oh my gosh, it's the sword swallowing that made his TED Talk go viral. Well, I flew over to Stockholm in 2008, and as president of the association, I gave him his patch and his membership card and everything. And we were there in front of Stockholm Central Station, just not very far from where they do the Nobel Prizes, and
Yeah.
where he worked at Karolinska. And he said, we got talking, and he said, you need to do a TED Talk. You need to do one. And this is coming from the guy who did the #2 biggest TED Talk. He said, you need to do one on sword swallowing. Because TED Talks are usually about the world's leading experts telling their backstory about why they do what they do. Well,
Right.
I said, okay, and boy, when he told me that, I said, so, oh, he asked me, he said, do you have any swords with you? And I said, sure, I've got a couple right here in my bag. And so we swallowed swords right there on the cobblestone in front of Central Station. And I said, but there's police all over the place, and carrying a sword or a knife, anything over than a few inches, is illegal here in Sweden. We're going to get caught and thrown in jail. He says, don't worry about that. I said, what? He said, no, they all know me. I said, they know you? I said,
Uh-huh.
because of that TED Talk? And he said, oh, yeah. I said, well, did that TED Talk help any? He said, are you kidding? He said, I'm booked for the next 10 years. I went,
Oh,
wow.
wow. That's crazy.
And so he said, you need to do a TED Talk. And right then and there, I decided I needed to put one together. It took me 5 years to study it, to put it together, to take an hour show and condense it down to 18 minutes
Oh,
and work
wow.
on it and practice it 3 to 5 times a day, day after day, week after week, month after month, until I put it together. And as you work on your TED Talk, as you develop what your big idea is, and you put it together, you'll come up with your big idea. You'll find out what your big idea is, and by the time you get ready to step out on stage and do your talk, it becomes crystal clear. You know what your big idea is. At the beginning, and I can ask this of Saba too. In the beginning, I just knew I wanted to do one on sword swallowing, and I knew then right off the bat, no, nobody cares about sword swallowing. It can't be about sword swallowing. It has to be about something that the audience cares about. And so I studied 4 major books. And if you've got a pencil, a piece of paper, you might want to write these down. We'll put them in the comments below too. The very first book I got was one by an author by the name of Jeremy Donovan. Jeremy, Jeremey. He's got an E at the end of it. Jeremy Donovan, Donovan. And it's called, I just lost the name of it, How to Deliver a TED Talk, something about secrets of the great presenters. Get it. Get it on audiobook, get it on physical hardcore book. Listen to the audiobook over and over and over. It's great. It's a little bit old, but it's really good. Easy to understand. Study that sucker. That got me started. Then the next one to get is one by a guy by the name of Carmine Gallo. Carmine Gallo, Gallo. And it's called Talk Like TED. And it's also Secrets of the Great Presenters. He's also got one on Steve Jobs, which is really good, how to be a good presenter. Get that one on audiobook and in hardcore book or even in Kindle. Study those. There's a third book that's out by Chris Anderson. He's the guy in charge of TED Talks. And Chris knows everything, but it's a little dry, it's a little long, it's a little hard to dig through, but it's good. And it's something about the official TED Guide or something like that, how to do a
Yeah.
TED Talk by
Yeah.
Chris Anderson. There's a few others. There's another author out there by the name of Akash, Akash. I think his last name is, I can't remember his last name. He's got 4 or 5 little tiny ones out there that are kind of ebooks. They're okay. They're cheap. They're okay. Get those. But really get the Jeremy Donovan and the Carmine Gallo.
Yeah.
Then when you start putting your TED Talk together, even though I didn't know where I was going to do one, I just knew I had to do a TED Talk. And I knew it had to be on sword swallowing, but I also knew it didn't have to be on sword swallowing. It had to be on something other than sword swallowing. When you think about the whole universe of people out there that could watch your TED Talk, I thought, you know what? Nobody cares about sword swallowing. If I do a TED Talk on sword swallowing, people are going to go, who cares? I'm not going to watch this. So my TED Talk really wasn't about sword swallowing. That is the paradigm shift at the end that became the big spin, the big unexpected paradigm shift at the end. I call it the UPS. But and so when I went through this whole process, it took me 5 years to put my TED Talk together, to practice and rehearse it. And at one point, I contacted a buddy of mine. I said, hey, I need a malaria mosquito picture, a photo of a malaria mosquito that's copyright free. And he said, what do you need it for? And I said, and he's a malaria expert. We've spoken together. And I said, I need it for a TED Talk. He said, oh, where are you doing a TED Talk? I don't know where. All I know is I have to do one.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, well, I'm on the nominating committee for the largest TED Talk in Europe. Would you like to come over and do one here? I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, at that point, I had it like 80% together.
Yeah.
Fine tuned, but I at least had the structure and the research and everything together. And I submitted him my proposal. And a few weeks later, he called me. I was in Kazakhstan at the time. He called me and said, okay, you're on. And it was September 4th in Maastricht, Netherlands. And I actually did a couple of them. I did one on a train called the TEDx Brain Train between Amsterdam and Maastricht, which was good practice.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I got my first TED Talk. For you, the way you need to do your first TED Talk is, first, you need to figure out who you are. Then secondly, set that aside and figure out what your big idea is. Mm-hmm. Find your big idea. It can't really be about you. It needs to be about them, your audience, everybody sitting in those seats. Make it all about them. When you figure out what your big idea is, what you've learned through your experience, through your vocation, through your hobby, whatever it is, your experiences, and then how that can relate to them out there in the seats, put that together, figure out what your big idea is, then gradually start to structure it. Once you put that together, it'll evolve. And by the time you get done with it, you'll have a complete, you'll start to know, oh, this is my big idea. This is what I'm here to tell the world. You've got one chance to tell the world whatever wisdom it is that you've got. And you're on that world stage to tell the world something very important. You need to know exactly what that is and be crystal clear about it and get it down to one thing, and then be able to broadcast that to them. Does that make sense, Saba? Is that what you learned?
Yeah, no, that's super true, because when I first got my talk, I had an idea of what I wanted to talk about, because the theme was over connections. I was like, oh, I can talk about that, like, with my past experiences, with me, going through college, with a lot of different things. And when I actually start to go into scripting it, when we were going back and forth on it, there was a whole nother idea that came out of the actual talk. So that's really super important to understand, guys, everyone who's watching, that when you are, trying to think of your idea, it has to be about the audience, not about yourself. You're not up there to self-promote, because I know a lot of people, they want to do a TEDx talk. That's a super good title to have, great way to use for your personal brand. But at the end of the day, in order to get to that point of even getting on stage, is the actual idea that you want to share with the audience. So I see a lot of you guys are tuning in. Drop a comment below. What's up, Presley, Lalaine, Reagan, Chris? How's it going, guys? So Dan, I kind of want to move into, so when someone has the idea, let's say they get a talk, what's the second step that they go into when they start structuring how to even give this talk if they have no idea where to start?
Okay. We're going to use you for a little bit of the example, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah.
It's fresh. We just went through
let's do it.
My experience and other people I have coached. I've coached several other TED speakers at other TED Talks all around the world, actually.
Yeah.
So when you figure out who you are and what you think you want to talk about, write that down. Try and figure out how to put that into a small 3 to 5 word phrased hook, what your big idea is. Then, and Saba had written a book. She had an Amazon bestseller book. She had these highlights. She's an entrepreneur. She knows what her highlights were. And of course, she would probably love to promote her book. But I don't think you even mentioned your book title once.
No, I did not.
Which you're not supposed to. You're not up there to promote yourself and your book, your products, your whatever.
Yeah.
You're up there to promote the big idea that will help somebody else's life. And if you can get that in your head, that is the hardest part, because everybody thinks they're going to go up there and talk about themselves.
Right.
And it is partially about you, but it's got to not be about you. It's got to be about them. So, so the idea is you come up with your idea. There's kind of a 5-part structure to do a TED Talk. And I know a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to have to do a formula, do a structure, because that's too formulaic. And that's true. If you wanted to, you could just wing it. You could fake it, walk up there the day of the TED Talk and just try and talk off the top of your head. But I'll tell you what, you're going to be so nervous and you're not going to get to your idea, and it's going to be confusing. It helps if you structure it and put some structure together. So what I worked with Saba on hers was there's really 3 parts to a TED Talk. There's the beginning, the middle, and the end. So the beginning has to be an attention-grabbing opening. We're going to call it the A section for attention. You need to do something that's very provocative. Write down the word provocative. It's got to be very you-centered. It's got to be very, not you yourself, but you to the audience, them-centered. Make it all about them. Ask them about what they want to do with their dreams, their whatever it is. Make it centered around them. When we started this Facebook Live, I gave you an example of you walking out on the red dot and doing your TED Talk. It has to be about you, because everybody that's sitting out there in the audience, they want to know, how is this going to impact me? Make it all about me. How am I going to benefit from this TED Talk? When I walk away from here in 18 minutes, what can I take home with me that will help my life? So make it about them. So in the A section, make it about them. Talk about you. Make it provocative. Say some very provocative. In mine, I said, I'm going to attempt to do the impossible right before your very eyes, right here at TEDx Maastricht. And they sat up and they're like, what? He's going to do the impossible? That's what I did. Then you have to give them several promises. You promise, I'm going to show you this, I'm going to show you that, I'm going to teach you this, at the end I'm going to give you this. And they're sitting there going, what? You've got to hook them in with those promises. And then you've got to kind of lead it into the body of the TED Talk. If you can do that, make it you, focused, provocative, make some promises. Also stick in some hints and clues. You kind of embed some hints and clues in the very beginning of your opening, your attention-grabbing opening. And people are like, what? This doesn't make any sense. Then as you go through your talk, and when you get to those points, it does make more sense to them. So that's kind of, did we hit everything on the attention-grabbing opening?
Yeah.
Anything you can think of there, Salva?
Yeah, so I know for my attention, I asked them questions. So right off the bat, when I asked them questions, I asked them 3 questions that got them thinking about those questions. And I told them to keep that in their head throughout my entire talk. So that right there was, engaging and bringing them into the journey that I was going to talk about. So that really grabbed their attention right there. So that's definitely right on this spot.
Yep. Okay. So that's kind of your A section. If you're doing a 15-minute TED Talk, that A section should be maybe 1 to 2 to 3 minutes. So you got to get everything fine-tuned down and plug all that stuff in to hook them in. Then when you get to the B section, the middle section, that's the body, I want you to think of your high point of your life, maybe something that was really great for you, or something that was a high point in your career, or something, especially if it has to do with your topic, your idea. And then I want you to think about your low point of your life. Now, TED Talks are just the opposite of business talks. Business talks, they talk about, they really build up the company, they build up the speaker. Okay, we've got Joe Blow coming on, and he's CEO of this company, and he's the Fortune 500 company, and they promote it very, very high. And then he walks out there and he starts selling his company and his products and his why you need to do business with us. That's how most business talks go. TED Talks usually go just the opposite. You take it down low, you start low and end high. So start low. It's a good idea to start with your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities. There's another really great book to listen to. I've just been, last month up in Alaska, I was listening to it. It's called Persuasion by Cialdini. Persuasion, not persuasion, but Persuasion by Cialdini. And he said, when you first start something out, if you can gain their trust, and a good way to gain their trust is by starting with your weaknesses, or telling your failures, your weaknesses, your problems that you went through, then people are going, oh yeah, I relate to you. I've been there. I've done that too.
Yeah.
So start low, and then at the end, when you get to your big idea at the end high. So a lot of times TED Talks, if you've seen Brene Brown's TED Talk, it's on vulnerability. If you can be
Mhm.
very vulnerable, very honest, very authentic, very transparent, and explain from your heart your difficulty. In my TED Talk, I talked about my fears. I grew up with social anxiety disorder, extreme fear, low self-esteem, inferiority complex, teased and beat up by the bullies. So I start low with my fears. And matter of fact, in my TED Talk, they didn't even know I was a sword swallower until the very end. And then
Yeah.
that's what put the twist on the end of it. In Saba's, we did just the opposite. We started with her high point very quickly about how you got your book. Tell them briefly about your B1, your first part of your body section.
Yeah, yeah. So I remember, so after I did my attention part, that was only about like maybe a minute long. And then I went into my B1 section where I literally just jumped into the exact day when I hit bestseller for my book on Amazon. And I took them in that entire experience. And that was probably around like a minute, minute and a half. But that they were like, oh my gosh, like this is awesome. Like, what did she do after that? And then that transitioned into B2, which was my lowest point, and that was very I that was probably like my favorite part. So Dan, talk about B2, and then I'll talk about why that was like my favorite part in the talk.
Okay,
Because
so
that part, it was like silent in the room.
yes, you could hear a pin drop in there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
and you can play with this structure, what works for you and your your components in your talk. But in her case, it helped to give a high point. In mine, I think I did start with very quickly touched on a high point. I said
yeah.
something about October 4th, 2007. I accepted the Ig Nobel Prize in Medicine at Harvard University. This was kind of a dream come true, something I never ever expected. It was a high point. And they're like, what? What the heck is this for? And it didn't make any sense. But I did a quick high point, and then I, went down to my low point, to my fears, and then I went through my whole backstory. So in your body section, you want to have three sections to your body section: a B1, a B2, and a B3. Your B1 can either be your high point very quickly, or your very lowest point. You can start up.
Hmm.
You can say, well, on the morning of blah blah blah, I got in my car, and a few minutes later, bam, I was in a car accident and paralyzed, or whatever. And you can just jump in with your low point if you want to, and then take them from your low point to your high point at the end. Or you can start at your high point and then go down really low. But it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you just have a big contrast, that you get across to the audience, I'm just a normal, vulnerable, weak human being that struggles with stuff too, and be very vulnerable. Saba's was her vulnerable part was her B2 section, where she told about some of the toughest parts of her life. And then her B3 section was how she made the transition, how she overcame obstacles and did the transposition. And then that came to the conclusion, which was her big idea at the end. Tell them
Yeah.
a little bit about your B2 section.
Yeah, yeah. So my B2 section, that was the lowest point. So I talked about this a little bit probably in my previous lives, but I haven't told you guys my entire story yet. But pretty much in my B2 section, I talk about when I was in high school and when I lost my mom. So I remember that section when I was delivering that in the actual room. The entire audience was literally like silent, and I was talking like to them, not at them, and I could see them like actually like tearing up because of how I was delivering my talk. And since I started with such a high point, it instantly dropped to very low, so it was a drastic change. So when I was doing my B2, it was just like it was just so cool, like so silent. And then, as I transition back into B3, they start to see how everything start to tie together and then turning it into the conclusion. So the structure of a talk, like a TEDx talk, it's definitely something that you do need to put together because it makes more sense, especially when the audience is going along with the journey, like with you. So so Dan, so when someone gets to like the B2, B3, how do they do the transition to the conclusion? And because usually, with a regular talk, numerous transitions. And for me, I didn't even know like how to do it. So when someone has the attention B1, B2, B3, like how do they do the conclusion?
Okay, let's talk about transitions real quickly. And you and I didn't really work on transitions a whole lot. Your transitions were very quick. We
Yep.
went from your high point, and then you said something like, I think in mine, I said, this wasn't the most memorable day of my life. Bam. And then I went, boom, there was a very short transition.
Yeah, I had very short ones
Very
too.
short ones too.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you're writing, I'm working on writing a couple books right now. And as you're writing the books, what you find is at the end of one chapter, you want to put in a little bit of a teaser for the next chapter. I haven't watched Game of Thrones yet, but I understand every episode they leave you hanging, and then you have to come back and watch the next chapter. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the teaser or the segue, the transition into the next one. So that's one thing you can do in every section. When you get to your A section, when you get done to the end of the A section, you want to do a transition into your B. When you get done with B1, you do a transition into your body 2, then you do a transition into your body 3. Sometimes they can be a good segue where that one leads it. You can say, but that wasn't the most memorable day of my life. And then the audience is going, really, what? And then
Yeah.
you pause, you walk a little bit across the dot, and you start your next transition. I'm going to be watching your video, by the way, to see if you walked across the
I
dot.
did do that. So
And Saba, as we were working through this, you remember I told you make your B1 section, your body 1 section, very high energy, high pitch, high volume, high delivery, very quick and excited,
yeah.
because the higher you make it, I kept telling her, ramp it up 5% more, 10% more, get it really excited, get really high, because then when you go down to your low section, it's really, really low.
Mm.
And take that down 5% less. And I think that contrast is what really got everybody's attention. They're like, holy cow, she's not speaking at the same delivery level, the same speed, the same volume all the way through. It was like a roller coaster ride. You took them on the high point and then you
Yep.
take them low.
Yeah, for sure.
And that worked, didn't it? It got their attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then you transition into your body 3 section, and that can be a different example. Here's one thing I want each of you to do. As you think through your life, through your big idea, through your potential TED Talk, think about 3 stories in your life, your high point, your low point, and maybe a turning point, a catalyst point, a mentor, somebody that really turned your life around, or an experience that really turned your life around. For me, my catalyst was being on my deathbed in India with 105-degree malaria fever the night before my 21st birthday. And my friend Greg Ormson, who lives 2 miles away from me now, kind of helped save my life. And I made it through that low point, that transition, and I put my fears to death, and I took on risks and challenges and wrote a list of what I called thrones, like a bucket list. And that was my turning point, my catalyst, my major change. So you've got to think about in your life your high point, your low point, or maybe your low point and then your high point, but what your catalyst was that caused you to get to that point. And when you do that, now I'm going to give you a couple of secrets for doing a TED Talk that makes them completely different from any business speech. In TED Talks, a good thing to put in is a lot of stories, a lot of visuals, a lot of emotion. And you put a lot of emotion into yours,
Yeah.
didn't you? On your B1, your
Mm-hmm.
exciting high point, and your B2, your low point. Visual stories, emotion, humor, if you can. If you can do great TED Talk to watch is my friend Michael Jr. It's a TED Talk called More Than Funny, and he does it at TEDx University of Nevada. And it's all humor all the way through, but he has some messages in it. Those are very, very important. But the biggest, most important thing, I think, and I've studied hundreds, thousands of TED Talks, and I've done several of them, and I've coached several of them. The most important thing is having what I call an UPS, unexpected paradigm shift. So you've got your body 1, your body 2, and your body 3. You're talking about a high point, a low point, and your turning point. And then you have this unexpected paradigm shift. And you're like, well, what is that? Well, that's like a plot shift, when the plot totally changes and you're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. And what you usually find out is a lot of times the thing that was your lowest point becomes your teacher. Your your fears become your fuel for doing something. Your uh, losses become your lessons. Your failures become your teachers. And I kind of taught that to Saba, and she kind of used some of that in hers too. You find out a lot of times it's through the process, through the bad stuff you go through, or the trying times, or the obstacles that you overcome, that you find your big idea. And if you can look for that in your talk, watch for that as it comes up. For me, people say, "Well, how are you the world's greatest sword swallower? You know, traveling in 45 countries today and on America's Got Talent and all these different things." You know, oh, did you grow up in a circus? Were you fearless or what? No, no, no. Just the opposite. It was
Yeah.
fear that was my low point that has brought me to this high point. It was that fear that I had to overcome that got me on this trajectory to where I'm at now. So I can't take credit for a lot of the stuff that I've done. It's just been kind of the way God's led me through my life. But in your case, watch for your low points and see if you can find out how that low point has turned into your high point, or how that struggle, that difficulty, that cancer, that car accident, that death, that bankruptcy, whatever your bad thing was that you went through, how that has really twisted your life and turned you around and taught you the lessons that now become your big idea. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Did I say that correctly, Saba? Does
Oh
that make
yeah.
sense?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense for sure. So I see a lot more people are tuning in. A couple questions. Dan, I want you to walk through the conclusion quick. We've been on here for 30 minutes already.
Oh gosh, sorry.
Yeah, so walk through the conclusion quick. Then there's a few questions I want to go through, and then we'll kind of wrap it up a little bit.
Okay, and if you're just now tuning in, go back and watch the video again, because
Yeah.
we explained how to get set up for, how to get invited to do a TED Talk, how to do the attention grabbing opening, how to do your body 1, your body 2, and your body 3 section. Then you put in a paradigm shift, a UPS, an unexpected, plot shift, a wow moment. Here's something I've learned from working in the music business. Your TED Talk is not about the words. It's about how you make the audience feel.
Hmm.
They won't remember your words, but they will remember how you made them feel. If you can, in your body 1 section, if you can give them a wow moment, like a chuckle moment, like a wow, that was cute. If you can give them an aha moment, or give them a moment, look for 3 different moments. Give them an aha moment, an oh moment, and a wow moment. And one of them has that paradigm shift when they're like, wow, I didn't expect that. Wow, that
Yeah.
just kind of blew my mind. That's the biggest thing that you're looking for. And that usually will point you towards what your big idea is in your conclusion. When you get to that, then you go through your conclusion. Your conclusion has a bunch of C's in it. Your conclusion is you bring the conflict up to a climax, and then you climax it, and you show how that paradigm shift answers all those questions you set up in the A section, and resolves all those hints and clues that you set up in the A section. And you give them a call to action. You tell them what you want them to do. You give them a challenge. You say, I challenge you. What is your blah, 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 whatever was part of your talk? What do you want to do with your blah, blah, blah? And give them a challenge, a call to action that they can take away and do in the talk. And then you give them your big idea, your hook. And you may have alluded to it in the attention grabbing opening and in the body section. In Saba, and like all the way through years, you had callbacks, things that you connected through in your attention grabbing A section, your body
Yeah.
B1, B2, and B3 section. And those kind of evolved. When you got to the final C conclusion section, they all had like a different meaning. Now all of a sudden it made sense.
Yeah. Yeah,
Explain
for
that a little
sure.
bit.
Yeah, for sure. And that definitely made sense with mine, especially how I structured mine, because in the beginning, for my attention, I asked the audience those 3 questions. And when they probably had those in their mind, the answers to those questions were probably something way different. But as I, went through my entire talk and got to the conclusion after I told my stories, my paradigm shifts, then they probably had a different answer. And it was I don't want to like say my part, because I want you guys to watch the video when it comes out in a few months, or hopefully a lot sooner. But when it got to that point, I literally saw in their eyes like, oh, that's what she meant. So it's that right there, why you need such a good structure with your talk, because, it, for one, it keeps their attention throughout the entire talk, especially if you're giving like a 15-18 minute talk. But when you get to that ending, that conclusion, it all makes sense and all ties together.
Yep. And
Oh,
and it worked, didn't it?
oh, it worked.
They didn't expect that the answer was going to be what you thought it was. I
Yeah,
want you guys all to watch her talk. I can't wait to see it either because
I'm so
it is
excited.
cool. She's got some cool things hidden in there, and finally at the conclusion, it all makes sense.
Yeah,
Uh,
it'll be
and then
good.
and then your call to action, and then you ask them to walk away and do something in your talk. What is you turn it back around to them. What is in my case, what are your fears? What are your dreams? What is your double-edged sword of fears and dreams? Swallow your sword, ladies and gentlemen, whatever it might be, follow your dreams. That's kind of how mine ends.
Yeah,
And then I challenge them to go out, and they had no idea I was going to end up swallowing a sword at the end of my TED talk.
yeah,
And it's now at 1.5 million views and
that's
like
so crazy.
70 languages it's been translated into. And
Yeah,
it just keeps on going.
yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So I don't know if did we answer, and if you didn't, if you jumped in the middle of this, go back and watch the video again. Hopefully, we'll give you some ideas. I know we've oversimplified it to make it really quick and short, and we've
Yeah.
overformulated it right now. Tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about callbacks. At the end, on your conclusion, you had callbacks from your A, B, and B sections.
Yeah. Yeah. So in all of those sections, and especially my attention, I set um specific words and wordings to call back to when I start to talk about my paradigm shift in my conclusion. So everything that I set up kind of towards the beginning, and especially as I went through my three bodies, when I, said those in the conclusion, then it made sense to um, like my disconnects that I had and my connects that I had at the ending. So if you guys weren't following me on Facebook, pretty much my talk about was like connecting, disconnecting, and reconnecting. And those three right there, that was a really great way to set up my talk because based on my experience and my storyline. So as I structured this entire talk, it resonated in a way that the audience probably had similar experiences in their life, how they can relate to, which made it beneficial for them because it taught them, how they can do the same or, reconnect with them and do all of that. But
Yep.
yeah, it was
Uh,
good. But we have one question. I want you to go over this real quick. So Lelena asked, what kind of credentials do you need to have to apply for a TEDx talk? Do you need any credentials? What do they look for?
you don't need any, you really don't need any credentials. What you need is a good idea that's got some paradigm shifts in it that's going to blow people away. Um, it helps if you have credentials. If you're the first guy to walk on the moon or to fly around the world on a hot air balloon or go to the deepest part of the ocean or whatever, sure, that helps. But as long as you've got either a good story or a good idea or a good twist at the end of it that actually reveals your idea that people can get, and if you can be really clear about that, it makes it really, really easy to put your story together. Now, as we've been going through this, we've told you how to put together your TED Talk, but we didn't really tell you how to get booked on a TED Talk. And everybody comes up and says, "Oh, how do you get booked to do a TEDx?" And just to be real clear, there is one big TED Talk in Vancouver, and that's the big, huge one. It's $5,000, $10,000 to go attend that one in April of each year, and it's already sold out for next year. I just tried to buy my tickets, and it's sold out.
Oh, wow.
So those are almost impossible to get to, but there are about 2,000 or more TEDx talks all around the world, and in your community there might be two or three of them, or in your state there might be a bunch of them. Those are a lot easier to get on. Once you have gone through this whole process that we've been describing and you put together your talk and you start to fine tune it and you crunch it down, and I'm telling you, spend a year or 2 years putting it together. It's your whole life story. It's your big idea. Get it really perfect. Tighten it up. Once you get that idea together, then start giving it to Rotary clubs or Elks clubs or women's groups or men's groups or churches or whatever, wherever it works. practice it, give it over and over, rehearse it. I would rehearse mine 3 to 5 times a day. When I'm laying in bed in the morning, I would run through the whole 18-minute talk from beginning to end. Then I'd jump out of bed and I'd think, oh, I got to fix that. And I'd go to my computer and I'd fix a couple of phrases. Then I would record it on my phone and try and get it perfect with the new edited version. Then I would go out and take a 2-mile walk and try and do my whole talk in 18 minutes. And as I went through my walk, I'd find out some other areas that needed to be tweaked. And I'd think, oh, I got to fix that line, fix that line. And I'd come back and I'd work on it some more, fix it, and then re-record it. And then I'd go back and then I would practice it again before I went to bed at night. So it would be in my head all night long and wake up the next morning doing it. I did that every day for about 5 years. You might not have that much time. You might have a year or 6 months. But get your talk together, practice it as many times, give it as many times as you can. And then the more you do that, it'll make sense. And I want you to take your 3 ideas, your body 1, your body 2, your body 3, find a story that goes with each one of them, find a lesson that you learned with each one of them, and find a photo, one picture, one photo, one image that goes with each section. And kind of make that your main photo. That you don't want a gazillion pictures up there. Do that. Once you get all that together and you've got your talk together, it'll all start to congeal and make sense. Then you'll know what your big idea is. And then you can go look on TED.com, look at all these TEDx's all around the world and find out what their theme is and see if they've got a theme that matches your talk, or see if your talk matches their theme, or that you can evolve it to fit their theme. Then you can submit it to them and you say, okay, my talk is going to be on, and Saba now knows what hers is on. She can do hers on connecting and disconnecting and reconnecting, or she can rewrite it, but now she knows her structure. She knows her life story and she's got it down and condensed, and she can rewrite it and do it for a number of different TEDx talks. Then you can submit it. You can say, I know what my big idea is, and it's not what you think. I'm going to show you how to do A by doing B, which is like maybe the opposite. Or, you know, and once you got that together, then you submit it to them. Then they're like, oh, now we're interested. And you fine tune it, and then you're ready to go. How long did you practice on yours, Saba?
Oh gosh, I don't even know. I practiced a lot, like a lot for the past couple of months, like past 2 months. I would do it every single day, like 3 times a day. I'd listen to it. I listened. That's like the only thing I listened to was myself when I recorded myself on my phone. In the morning when I'd work out, when I was driving, I would just listen to it over and over and over and over and over again until, number 1, I memorized it. But then number 2, it gave me a better idea of the places where I needed to edit and, you know, rewrite my talk and stuff like that. So that was really helpful to do. So guys, when you're, you know, writing out your talk, it's a lot of it is about, you know, listening to it and rehearsing it and making sure you actually know it. And it's not like a speech you're giving. It becomes a part of you, because as I went through my entire journey, it literally became a part of me. Like I still know it. I haven't listened to it for like a good week now, but I still know it by heart if I had to go somewhere and give it right now. But, I love that. I feel like we just went through like the entire structure and the entire process. If someone wants to, you know, do a TEDx talk or wants to first like write one themselves, and then like what you said, look for different places where they can apply to give one. So Dan, I want to wrap it up. We've been on here for 40 minutes already. Super crazy, went by super fast. So Dan, is there any like last nuggets that you want to drop before we hop off, and just words of advice for people who want to give a talk, who are scared to give one, they really don't know if they can give one? What are just some final words that you want to share with our audience?
Number 1, study as many TED Talks as you can. Study the good ones, the great ones. Study ones that are similar to what your theme is. Study mine. My biggest one, the very first one, is the one that's gone viral. It's called Cutting Through Fear. Dan Meyer, TEDx Maastricht, Cutting Through Fear. Study that one. Study Saba's when it comes out. Watch it. Number 2, get the books. Get the book Talk Like TED by Carmine Gallo, and How to Deliver a TED Talk by Jeremy Donovan, and maybe even the one by Chris Anderson or Akash. Study those. I've got a book coming out called How to Get a Standing Ovation on Your TED Talk. So when that comes out, definitely get that. Contact me. It'll make lots of sense. I'm going to give you all these secrets in that book on how to get a standing ovation on your TED Talk. Number three, find your big idea. Research it, figure it out, find out how your low point ended up, what your lesson was, who your mentor was, what your turning point was, and what your big idea was that ended up here at the end of your TED Talk. And crystallize that, get it really clear on what you want to tell the world and how you could really help the world through doing your TED Talk. Put those together, stay in touch with Saba and me, and I don't know. I think hopefully that helped give you some
Yeah.
ideas and stirred you up a little bit.
Yeah, of course. And if people want to contact you directly, where can people find you at, Dan? And we'll drop links below also.
Great. You can contact me through Cutting Edge Entertainment, INNER, entertainment.com, cuttingedgeentertainment.com. Or you can look for my TED Talk called Cutting Through Fear, and you should be able to find me on there. Or America's Got Talent, or France's Got Talent, Italy's Got Talent. Some of those are out there on the web. And it's pretty easy to find me. I would love to come do coaching at TEDx events. I do it around the world now. And if you've got a TEDx event where you've got 10, 12, 15 people that need to know this kind of stuff, let me know, and would love to come spend a Saturday with your folks and coach them, and maybe even have Saba come too, and we do it together or something. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, awesome. This was great. So thanks so much, Dan, for coming on. Guys, if you guys found a value from this, comment below #value, and make sure to connect with Dan. He is super connected. He knows a lot about, how to do this entire thing. When I, first connected with Dan, I was completely lost. But, when I went on stage just about a week ago, I literally gave the best talk like in my entire life. I didn't mess up once.
Let me ask you one quick question.
Yeah.
So the day before, when you went for the rehearsal, were you a little bit nervous?
I was, but it was funny.
But did you know that you had the whole thing in your head?
I had the entire thing.
And you had the confidence, didn't you?
I did. And it was funny because usually every time, because I've spoken a lot, and usually every time before I speak, I'm a little bit nervous no matter what I'm doing. But literally the day of my talk, I was so relaxed.
Yep.
So relaxed. I walked on and I was just so casual. I was having a conversation with them, and I think that was the best part.
And the cool thing is you could back down. You didn't have to be nervous and stressed out. You could back down and talk to the audience and communicate and smile and cry.
Yeah.
And you talked very relaxed to them because you knew it in your head and in your heart. Mm-hmm. That's how you do a good TED Talk.
Yeah, I love it. Awesome. So guys, we're going to hop off here. But Dan, I have one last question that I always end all of my lives when I have a guest on. And that question is, you have done so much with yourself, with your brand. You've gone to speak. You've been on America's Got Talent. You've done so much. So Dan, what truly makes you unforgettable with everything that you've done?
Wow, that's a good question. Usually the sword swallowing is pretty unforgettable, but that's not my whole message at all. That's really the teaser at the beginning. My message is the impossible is not impossible. And if I can inspire you to do the impossible in your life, if that's doing a TED Talk or doing something else in your life, that's what I'm here to do. So that's what makes me unforgettable, is I inspire people to make a change in their life and do the impossible in their lives.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for tuning on. This was great. Make sure if you guys are going to tune in later watching the replay, go back and watch the entire thing. This was literally thousands and thousands of dollars of value dropped. Take this to heart and actually apply it to your own life. I say this at the end of each of my lives that I do. If you want to make a change in your life, it starts with you. We're here to give you knowledge and advice. I literally come on here every single day, drop thousands of dollars of value. Actually take it and apply it because it does work. So thank you guys for watching. Thanks, Dan, and I will catch you guys on the next live. Bye.